Good evening, everyone. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. I will remind the public that there is a mask requirement in this building. I believe there are some in the lobby if you do not have one. I would appreciate you getting one. And the public is also reminded that if they wish to speak tonight, they need to complete a speaker form, also found in the lobby, and turn it in. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district, and all community comment will take place at the beginning of the meeting, and you will have 4 minutes to speak, and we will get right into that. First up, we have Joseph Dobrian.
Joseph Dobrian, 1015 2nd Avenue. Several parents have asked me to call the board's attention to an email dated September 22nd, 2021 from our superintendent, Mr. Degner. I quote, "Last year, COVID-19 forced us to rethink many of our practices within the school day, including our classroom celebrations, such as fall, winter, and spring parties. The decision to do away with elementary classroom celebrations last year provided time for us to focus on the overall classroom party concept. Our work around equity is at the forefront of everything we do, and in recent years we have looked at participation in our classroom parties through an equity lens. For cultural or religious reasons, many of our families opt for their students not to participate in one form or another. For those that do participate, access for all students is not the same, i.e. lack of costumes, food, cards, etc. It's for those reasons that we will continue with the practice of no classroom parties moving forward. We understand that celebrations are an important part of our students' school experience. Each of our schools will continue to find inclusive ways to have classroom and school-wide celebrations that don't fall around holidays throughout the school year. While these may look different, they will continue to be part of our system of support. We strive to make all students and families feel welcome and included in all aspects of our school day and our school community." Well, believe it or not, I was once a kid myself. I remember learning to write cuneiform in a little one-room schoolhouse in Ur. And so I am aware that throughout the history of pedagogy, elementary schools have been in the business of preventing children from enjoying childhood. I also understand that concerns might exist about some students being unable to afford edible contributions or costumes or other expenses associated with a classroom party. However, I suggest that this policy goes too far. I'm dismayed in particular by Mr. Degner's assertion that our work around equity is at the forefront of everything we do. I insist that educating children should and must be at the forefront of everything our school system does. So why not hold classroom celebrations of specific religious or historical holidays? Why not use those events to instruct children in subjects like comparative religions or history while they are playing games and eating cookies? Why not use those parties to celebrate our cultural variety? Celebrate our cultural variety instead of eliminating them or replacing them with events that have no connection to anything else. I suggest that by doing the latter, we contribute to the current fashion of taking the meaning out of everything we say or do and replacing real, explicable celebrations with insipid, artificial celebrations that are inevitably less fun and less beneficial for having been deprived of a point or a purpose. I ask God's blessings on your deliberation. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Thank you. Next up, Dan Cobble.
Good evening, school board members. My name is Dan Cobble, and I have come here tonight to talk to you about critical race theory and the need for using frameworks such as it to teach children about the impact of social inequity. First, however, a little bit about my background. I'm an alum of ICCSD, and I went to college at UNI where my focuses were social studies education and human geography, specifically thematic cartography. I also worked for the Geographic Alliance of Iowa on various projects using maps and geography to teach students about the impact of various historical factors such as slavery, Jim Crow, and the Great Migration on the U.S. population over time. The curriculum for all social studies courses centers on social relationships and how human experiences have and will contribute to the functioning of society. Ultimately, the goal for teaching social studies is to give students enough of an understanding of history and social dynamics to go out into the world and make a positive impact. This is only possible if we give students a well-rounded education, something which requires educators to highlight the inequities which have existed throughout history and continue to shape the lives of millions of Americans. These inequities exist and are clear to anybody who studies the various topics which compose social studies. History, economics, geography, government, psychology. It is clear from anyone who has studied these topics that systemic racism is a major force in our society. To not teach children about this reality is to fail to prepare them to be good citizens. Just as it is important for physics teachers to teach their students how gravity works, it is equally important for students to learn about the impacts of race, racism, and other forms of bigotry on our society. That is the only way they will fully understand how that historical inertia has shaped the world we live in today. Teachers must be supported as they teach these truths. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Teresa Seeberger.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. First of all, well, I represent the school bus drivers that work for the contract company. And I think there's now at least 20 of us here. And I, first of all, thank you folks for listening to us and our concerns about getting some of the funds that was bequeathed, so to speak, to you folks. We're asking, a number of things had been tossed around, if we should ask for hazard pay, going back and forward, or retention bonuses. I think the consensus of the union is to ask for hazard pay. And as I'm sure you all know, we are essential workers. My hat's off to all the other essential workers that have worked through this pandemic continuously. It seems as though bus drivers can kind of be invisible somewhat in the background. Healthcare workers, of course, deserve so much, and they're very front in the public. Teachers as well, the paras, so much. But the school bus drivers, people don't kind of know about us or think about us, but we do the very essential job of transporting all these children to get to school. So it's an essential service. We are, as a part of our job, we have to be in a very small bus, sometimes with 50 students, and there's literally no way to escape from whatever germs might be going around. Thankfully, a lot of the children comply or are told to comply with the mask mandates, but it is a hazard job. I know of one person, he would never say it, but I know from his description that he got COVID and he left. We're lucky that we haven't lost a lot more. But as you might know, there's a huge shortage. Last I knew, we were down 10 drivers. So everyone in our office, including the contract manager, is driving a bus. We're all pitching in where we can. Sometimes we'll work till like 10 o'clock at night on a trip, and then we have to get up and be at the bus barn at like 6:30 in the morning. So we're doing everything we can to help keep things going at the bus barn. A couple things about this work, as you know, it's part-time. However, unlike a lot of part-time jobs, it's a split shift. So we have to go to work twice a day. So for those of us who would really benefit, which is kind of most of us, from a second job, it's very hard to have a second job when you've got one on each end. And in addition, the job we do, we're not paid as well as truck drivers, et cetera, but we're not transporting furniture or clothing or toilet paper. We're transporting children. The children of all the parents in this district and the students. And it's hazardous, even separate hazard word, just to drive around. I go to Garner Elementary, and all the kids running around, it's stressful to try to make sure I'm safe. So for those reasons and more, and I know several of my colleagues have prepared comments, I would ask that you utilize some of the funds that are coming in to give us hazard pay, retention bonus, whatever you feel appropriate. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, Audrey Alt.
Good evening. Like he said, I'm Audrey Alt, and I guess I'd like to say first, I apologize for how I look, but I just got off a 2.5-hour bus route. Most of us did, so I didn't have time to go home. I, unlike most of them, am a monitor on the bus, which means I am not sitting in that seat. I'm up and down the aisles, I'm wiping noses, the same thing your paras are doing, your teachers are doing. The drivers do it when they come by, because it doesn't matter how much, and our company does try very hard to give us some space around the drivers so that they could be somewhat protected. Those kids have got to come past the driver. And they're coughing, they're sneezing, they're everything. Now, we're hardworking and dedicated. We wouldn't do it if we didn't love it, because we don't get paid enough, just like your teachers don't. But we are their first district person they see every day, and the last district person they see every evening. So we kind of, hopefully we try to set the tone for the school day. We do know that you received some ARPA money, and it's supposed to be earmarked, or parts of it, for hazard pay for essential workers, which we like to consider ourselves some. Every day you guys worked, we worked. And so we are asking for some hazard pay for last year and for this year going forward. I don't know how many of you have actually been in the schools lately, but as much problems as they have getting kids to wear their masks, try being on a bus. It's really impossible, because they think they're done with school. So they want to take it all off. And so we don't have the options. We only have so many options. So we are asking for hazard pay. We would like to see maybe 25%. We, unlike a lot of other people, don't have, we have no PTO days. We have no sick days. We don't have comprehensive health care, any of those things. We have limited resources, and so we're asking you to see us as just as important. But on top of that, me personally, like Teresa said, our managers have been driving bus every day, but our office staff have had to drive bus all last year and this year. And in my opinion, they also deserve hazard pay, especially the office workers, because they don't have a union like we do to speak for them. So I do want to see them. And in my last minute, let me just say, we are low on monitors and drivers. So anybody listening from anywhere, we are running, there's a bonus to sign up. There's everything we can do. If it's a mother with a 2-year-old, send them our way because we let them ride the bus. Unfortunately, we don't have air conditioning in most of our buses, so it's a little warm and it's a little cold in the winter, but send anybody you know because it'll help everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Dan Ramsey.
Good evening. I'm Dan Ramsey. I'm the Chief Steward for Local 238 in the Iowa City School District, representing Iowa City school bus drivers. I want to make 3 essential points. Number 1 is that bus drivers are essential workers. If you have any questions about that, look at some of the districts around the country that don't have enough bus drivers. Kids are getting to school 2 to 3 hours late. Some kids aren't getting home till 7 or 8 o'clock at night after their school days because the drivers have to drive one set of kids home, come back to the school, pick up another, and drive them back there. Also, even in Iowa City, locally, Cedar Rapids has had to cancel trips because they don't have enough school bus drivers. That was on the news a few days ago. Even in Iowa City, we've had to cancel a few trips ourselves because we don't have enough school bus drivers to cover routes and trips as well. So we are essential workers. Secondly, what we do is hazardous. We've probably got about 50 or 60 people in this room. Imagine if everybody in this room was on a school bus, not wearing masks, and in that confined space. Particularly last year. I know last year that there was a federal mandate that said that masks were required on buses. But because of whatever reason, because of Kim Reynolds' mask mandate ban, the district was a little confused about whether or not to enact that on buses. So even though there was a federal mandate on masks on buses, we as bus drivers were instructed not to enforce that we had no power to enforce mask mandates on buses. So speaking of hazardous, we had bus loads of kids that didn't have to have masks on, despite the fact that there was a federal mandate saying that they needed to have masks. It got really confusing there when, with the governor that we have. And so we just didn't know what to do. The district didn't know what to do. And as Audrey said, we are part-time workers. We have limited resources. We represent a wide variety of people. We have veterans. We've got a lot of retirees. A lot of retirees have quit because of obvious reasons. We've got a lot of minorities. We have single parents, because it fits in with their school schedules. We've got a lot of people that, have a hard time maybe have a difficult time finding jobs in other places. We're highly trained, and so we're here to ask you for a 25% hazard pay. Now, I know that the question might come up, well, isn't that between you and the company? Perhaps it is. But my response to that is the company isn't going to give it. So unless you guys can come up with some money for hazard pay for us, that's the only way we're going to do it. If you don't do it, we're not getting any. And despite the fact that we are essential workers, and we work really hard, and we try really hard at everything that we do. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for listening to the bus drivers. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Next up, Rob Alt.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. I don't live in the district. My wife and I commute up from Cedar Rapids because we love serving the community, and we've done it since 2007. This last year and a half has been very difficult. Like it's been pointed out, this is a part-time job, but it is a full-time commitment. There are personal and professional standards that we have to maintain, driving-wise, personal-wise, year-round because of the credentials we carry and the requirements that those credentials confer upon us. We also, like has been pointed out, we have limited means. We don't get sick days. So when we are feeling poorly, we have to stay home. and we have to miss out on getting paid for 2 shifts, which contract-wise, we also have to, we get a limited number of those with our company. So we have to decide, are we contagious? Do we just not feel 100%? Can we still work? Those are all things that we have to go through every day, especially during this pandemic. Because when we aren't feeling well, that means our immune system is dealing with something else, and we have to come to work and take the chance of catching something that could be deadly and could just be the last straw for us. So that's why we're coming to you and asking for hazard pay, for doing the job, for shouldering the burden, for basically honoring our commitment to the young people of this city. And it's something that we're proud to do, but there are other professions that are receiving hazard pay for the pandemic, and I believe that we are also deserving of that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Jesse Case.
Good evening. My name is Jesse Case. I'm the principal officer of Teamsters Local 238. We represent the school bus drivers in the district. They're also employed by Illinois Central School Bus. First, I'd like to thank and commend the school board for your handling of the pandemic. We live in a great community and are lucky to live in such a great school district. And I admire your willingness to serve and the job you've done. So I want to thank each and every one of you for getting us this far during a pandemic. I'm here because the district and the nation is facing a shortage of school bus drivers. It's a pandemic of its own that needs attention and triage. School bus drivers are the first point of contact for thousands of children every morning and the last point of contact in the evenings. School bus drivers are essential to the operation of the district and at risk by working in an enclosed environment with a highly unvaccinated population and a demographic that sometimes doesn't always listen to instructions the first time. Instructions like pull up your mask, right? Somebody spoke about that earlier. And nobody can argue that school bus drivers aren't essential. And yet, due to the part-time and split shift nature of the job, there are few benefits and few incentives to retain our professional drivers who transport our kids at their own risk. We're here today to ask the district to open a dialogue with Illinois Central School Bus and the Teamsters Union on how we can provide hazard pay to school bus drivers. Retaining our current workforce is essential to averting a full-scale driver shortage in our district. The Teamsters have a good relationship with both the district and Illinois Central School Bus, and I'm confident that a proactive plan that's in the interest of all parties will benefit the district and our students. The federal government has provided federal funds to school districts to provide and offset hazard pay for essential workers. The pandemic relief legislation allows up to a 25% increase in wages for hazard pay, and we believe school bus drivers fit the definition of who the legislation was intended to help. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. We have one last speaker, Na Lee.
Good evening. My name is Na Li. I'm the president of Iowa City Area Chinese Association. Thank you for reading our petition for Lunar New Year. We want school district to recognize Lunar New Year as the school holiday because Asian group is the largest minority in Iowa City. It is also the largest group in the Coralville and Iowa City together. And we feel we need a representation of our culture. And we are so lucky in a community that's inclusive. And I was told we will come back in November to see the vote for the Lunar New Year. So thank you, everybody. I'd also like to talk about a program. It's for the Iowa City School District junior and high school students. This program is called Star Talk Year-Round Program. It is a 3-semester plus 1 summer day camp Chinese learning program, especially designed for Iowa junior high and high school students of grades 8 to 11 who wish to learn Chinese. Participants will earn 11 University of Iowa credits upon successful completion of the program. The Star Talk program is funded by a National Security Agency grant designated to promote critical language education in the U.S. Selected participants will receive a scholarship of approximately $6,800 to cover all learning costs, including tuition, learning materials, lunches during the summer camp, cultural activities, workshops, and field trips. Because it is a day program, no housing accommodation will be provided. The class time will not take the school class. It will be before the school class. It's usually in the morning from 7 to 8 a.m. The program will admit 20 students. And if you want to get to know more information, I'll put the flyer outside the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I'm sorry. Do you have multiple flyers? Can you give one to Kim so that way she can ensure we're able to get it? You can leave one on the table as well for those in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's the end of our community comment portion, so we can move into our next item, which is the approval of tonight's agenda. So I would entertain a motion.
I move that we've approved tonight's agenda.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open.
I'm a yay vote, Kim. I'm still getting logged in.
Thank you, Director Clausen.
Yeah, half an hour, man.
All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you, Kim. Next up, we have our consent agenda. Were there any questions from directors as they reviewed the bills?
I reviewed bills, no questions.
I reviewed bills as well. I had no questions.
Anyone else? All right, any items from consent that directors would like to pull? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Move the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, Kim, we're ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. We can move on down to our policy review. As a reminder, we brought this at our last meeting, and it's coming back again. If we need to have discussion here, then there will be action on it later. So now would be the time if directors had any comments or questions, or if the admin team had anything to add since we talked about it last time. That's our facility use fee schedule.
No new additions from us, Sean.
Were there any questions or comments from directors on this? All right, we will put that in our back pocket for a later action. So let's move right into our discussions. First up is our school year and health and safety and enrollment information.
Sure, and I think we'll be pretty brief tonight. Thank you, though, President Eystone and board. Just a couple quick things. We did put out communication yesterday that the temporary restraining order was extended for another 14 days, so that leaves the district mask requirement in place for that period of time. A couple other components. We were approved as a Test Iowa site, and so we'll be able to work through, we had to receive that approval through the Department of Education, so we'd applied and received that approval last week, so that was positive news for us as well. So thank you to Jess and her team, and Kristen for their work in making that happen. We provided a vaccine update to staff this week. Chase can share some more on that when I turn it over to him to talk a little bit more about some of the workforce components that are loosely related to some of the community comments tonight. But the vaccine update, essentially booster shots for those that have received that Pfizer vaccine. And so we had started pushing out communication to our staff around that component. Obviously, we're anxiously awaiting the release to be able to start vaccinating the 5 to 11-year-old group and the potential that comes from that. But we're trying to keep everybody as well informed as we can. And those are kind of just my brief opening comments. Amy will touch a little bit on enrollment again tonight. There was a request for some additional data and information that she'll hit on. But otherwise, I'll flip it to Chase. It looks like Ruthina might have a question before I do that, and then Amy will follow Chase.
Not a question, but for those who may be watching later, can you just give a brief explanation of what that means that we've been approved for a Test Iowa site? I mean,
Sure. So it allows us to basically receive those test kits through the state. And so we're able to ask for and receive those test kits through the state, and we can work directly with them through that process. Previously, we'd been asking Healthy Kids Clinic to try to acquire those tests for us. And so we think that's a positive step for us to be able to get a larger amount of tests available that can be sent home with kids.
Thank you.
Anything I missed there, Chase?
No, I think you got it. Just that it allows us to distribute them directly to students that are requesting them and send them home. Good evening. Just a couple more details on, oh, sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
Just on the Test Iowa site, will they need to can they return the test kits to school, or will they need to go drop them off at the state hygienic lab?
That's a great question, and they can return them to school, or they can bring them here to the ESC, and so they have to be sent in UPS, and so we are going to try to make that available to do the collection. Of course, that might delay them getting the results that they bring them to school, but we want to try to eliminate as many hurdles as families have to getting those tests, so they can bring them right back to school, and we'll get them sent in to them. The results, of course, would go directly to the family. The results wouldn't come to the school, so they'd get them directly back to them. So good question. Thank you. To build on what Matt was saying about the vaccine, that is exciting news about the approval of the booster and including for teachers that received it. We've been in constant communication weekly, and so that's pretty constant with our colleagues at UIHC about some plans moving forward, and so trying to keep up to date on that information. We sent out an email to to all staff about the vaccine availability with directions of how they can access an appointment through MyChart, because most of our staff were vaccinated through the university, and so they can go right into MyChart to be able to do that, along with other ways that they can get appointments. As of now, Moderna and Johnson & Johnson are not approved for the booster. One of the, disappointing pieces for us, by no fault of anyone, is that the vast majority of our staff actually got Moderna, and that was just, you remember back in the spring, you didn't know what vaccine was coming in when, and so most of our clinics had Moderna. So it's a minority number of our staff that are actually available to get the booster through Pfizer, but great partnership with the OHC to continue to make sure that's available. Along with that is the ongoing conversation about vaccines for littles. There was more news today from the FDA, so that continues to move down the track, and we are also in conversations with Johnson County Public Health, UIHC, and other community partners about how best not only to distribute that information, but to get families to vaccine sites. We continue to think that collaborating and working with the sites that are going to be set up in the community are our family's best options, rather than trying to stand up standalone clinics in our own schools. Like we're going to talk about a little bit about our staffing shortage. We're not the only organization in the community with a staffing shortage. And so the pharmacies and the hospitals will have a difficult time standing up additional clinics for us. And so it becomes a staffing situation, as well as with approval of parents. A clinic for 17 and 18-year-olds, a little bit different than a clinic for 7 and 8-year-olds. And so trying to really work on communication pieces, as well as seeing what we can do to support families in getting to those clinics, whether that UIHC, Mercy, or other places, through transportation support, are the conversations that we're having, so that when it is activated for our littlest learners, how can we best support families to make sure that they can have access to those vaccines that are going to be available in the clinic. I'll pause there before I go on to some staffing stuff, but questions about vaccine?
Chase, I assume that you're communicating with other districts too about getting 5 to 11-year-olds vaccinated when that's available?
Are we communicating with other districts?
Yeah, right, just to see that, if they have some ideas that seem to work that we could.
We're kind of, yes and no, Charlie. We're working with Johnson County Public Health, and they have kind of taken a broader approach, and they're communicating with some of the surrounding districts. I haven't necessarily reached out to any of my counterparts in any of the surrounding districts yet, as we're just trying to still collect information about how this is going to look as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
I could tell you, Charlie, as a superintendent's group, we do share a lot of those different components, and then if there's any best practices or a good idea, we routinely try to share those back with each other. And so as we learn those components, certainly work with Chase and his team on what some of those other districts might be trying to do as well.
And Kristen reminded me that Jess Jimerson, who couldn't be here this evening, has also reached out to some of her nurse colleagues in other districts, and our approach about looking more at the community resources is in line with most of what other districts are doing at this time. So to talk about the beginning of the school year a little bit and shifting gears and talking staffing, building off of what our colleagues from the bus company shared about shortages and concerns that we have in all areas of our operation. Those do currently exist. We are looking at vacancies in a number of our employment areas, from paraeducators to custodians to nutrition services to bus drivers. And as some of them mentioned, it has caused constraints in some areas of needing to cancel extracurricular activities when we don't have enough drivers, but also in our other areas causing concerns about coverage in buildings. We're over 50 paras short right now, over 15 nutrition service workers short right now, and so this is something that we're seeing across a number of our employment groups, not just in one area. And we're not alone. We have talked to our colleagues in other districts, and everyone is seeing shortages, especially in the area of paras, and we're seeing that in our community, across the state, across the nation. I read an article today, and our bus drivers live this as well. Over 80% of the school districts in the nation are reporting they have a shortage of bus drivers. Most of the districts in the state are reporting they're having a very, very difficult time with substitutes and fill rates for subs. We are actually at the higher end across districts at an 80% fill rate for our teacher subs right now. That's low for us. We usually enjoy fill rates in the 90%, and so at 80% we're feeling that crunch. But in all honesty, we're doing better than a lot of the school districts around the area, and so we're trying to look at, okay, what's been successful for us and how can we expand on some of those pieces. We went to a concept called building subs a couple of years ago, and we were giving every building at elementary one building sub. We opened that up to allow them to have 2 in every building. Those have traditionally been non-benefits eligible positions. Les and Jeremy and I are working on transferring those to benefit eligible positions, again, to try to attract additional individuals to those positions, maybe want a little bit more flexibility, but also have that stability of a benefit provided position. So really looking at creative ways that we can try to meet the demands, but unfortunately it's not something that, I don't know if it's fortunate or not fortunate. Overall, it's something that is plaguing the entire industry, but that doesn't mean that we aren't trying to find creative ways to address what we're doing and to alleviate those challenges. Happy to answer questions on the staffing pieces or where we are at this point.
Just a quick question. You mentioned that we're looking to fill 50 para positions. So knowing that we're that sort of short-staffed, are we able to meet the needs of students who would need paras? I mean, how does that equate to services that we should be providing?
So yes, we are, and it takes a lot of planning by the different departments and also our principals about making sure that we prioritize the para coverage and the teacher coverage on any one given day so that those needs can be met, Rathina. We're trying to be more flexible in how we assign and not just looking at, well, you were scheduled at building A, and no, we need to kind of make sure that if the needs are at building B, that we can shift or into a different grade level. But that is our priority, that even with the shortages that we make sure that all student needs are met.
Thank you.
I say this all the time, and if there are resources that you need from the board, I assume you're not shy in bringing those resources request to us. You know, a substantial increase in pay for some period of time might increase the likelihood that people will, will try to do these jobs. I don't know.
Well, Charlie, I appreciate that, and you all are very supportive, and you were very supportive last spring when we made some significant changes to our pay scale for our support employees, which I think we need to be more vocal about that, and not only that immediate impact, but the long-term impact for those employees. And so things that that the board can do is really to just get the word out that we are hiring, that we're looking for individuals that want to join the district, not only in teaching positions, but in support positions as well, and that they are positions that are benefits eligible, so that individuals have that available to them too. We will continue to look at our pay practices as we want to make sure that we stay competitive, and that we are treating our staff right. I think that's something we valued for a long time, is making sure that we respect, appreciate, and show our staff that we value them, and so we can continue to do that. And so we'll have that conversation about what we can do internally as we look at how we progress through this year. And it didn't come up a lot earlier, but I'd also like to say that we have a great partner in Iowa Central as we talk about our bus drivers. Our bus drivers are not employed by the district; they're employed by Iowa Central, and we're in constant communication. Esme and I speak with the bus company multiple times a week. Esme speaks to them daily, and the drivers are right. Bob and his team that are the office crew are out driving buses every single day without complaint, and so it is all hands on deck, and we truly do appreciate the work that our bus drivers are doing to help get our kids to and from school.
I think Illinois Central.
Well, yeah, they're like doing business as. I checked his block, because you're right, Illinois Central, now Iowa Central.
But I appreciate that. I guess I have a question about the building subs, which I've been a huge supporter of for a very long time. I just think it's a great idea, and I really appreciate moving to get them benefits eligible. I think that's going to be huge, just so that they feel part of the staff. So my question is, what's our retention been like with those folks? Do we find that we get them in the buildings and they stick around for, are they enjoying that? Do they like that experience by staying?
So that's a good question. I don't have that data in front of me, but we can look that up. But I will tell you that one thing that we've seen that work as is almost a springboard to a classroom teacher position or a different position in the district. And so new graduates in December, if we don't have classroom openings, might come on as a building sub in the spring, or if we just don't have an opening at the time, they'll come on and do that for a year. And then as a classroom position opens up, they've been in the building for a year, 2 years, the staff's familiar with them, the principal's familiar with them, and so a lot of those folks end up getting interviewed and then move into contracted teaching positions.
That's great to hear. I think, and I guess that leads me, and again, this isn't a question, but more of kind of looking forward as you think about grow your own. I think and I'll plug this for the paras, getting that single health insurance for no cost. We have an excellent insurance plan, and that is I would imagine that's an outsized benefit for that typical level of pay. And so I know that's a real benefit for folks just in the community. We do provide that single health insurance at no cost to the employees. One thing I'm thinking about moving forward that might be attractive to some paras is the same thing within our Grow Your Own program, right? That we find these folks and we can in some way say, you know what, here's an example of a ladder into teaching, or a ladder into, to try to get some of our folks, especially obviously our diverse staff, kind of moving up through the ladder. And I just think, I would hope that would be encouraging for folks moving forward as we expand that program. I know we're just in the initial stages, but it's exciting. And just as we look at, finding paras, we can move up into the classroom. And then obviously, I think students, identifying those students who we think are really promising folks to go into the field, might be one thing we do other than just saying, well, here's a bunch more money or a signing bonus. I mean, those could be ideas too, but kind of having a career ladder, I think, might be an attractive incentive for folks to come into the system.
So it's not on the agenda tonight, JP, but thank you for that opening, so stay tuned. November 9th, we're going to bring back some exciting information on our Grow Your Own programs. And so
I look forward to it.
We're already looking forward to sharing that with the board in a few weeks.
Great, thanks.
I just wanted to add that, if I'm not mistaken, I think a more recent building sub, Rossler, something like that, actually was a building sub and now went on to a different position, just to show as an example of that serving as a springboard. Can't remember the guy's name, but
I think it's something with a P.
Postler, maybe, I don't know.
Question, Chase, and yes, Rossler, no one could ever, or we never could spell it right either. But so I can hear the concern in your voice around the shortages that we're seeing in these different employee groups. And so I appreciate the strategies you're putting into place to make sure it doesn't get worse. I'm curious, though, if these conditions do persist and these tactics that we have in place are not bringing more people on or helping people retain, I'm assuming you're kind of also putting Plan B, Plan C, Plan D kind of ideas together, in terms of how to manage going forward if this doesn't get better.
Yes, we are. We're looking at what we can do in a variety of different areas and really thinking about different strategies in a way that we've never thought about them before when we talk about retention. And really, I think that's a big piece of it. It's not just an incentive to get somebody to come on board. It's how do we make that person stay? And I know this wasn't exactly JP's point, but it's not always about the wage or their salary. And so we're trying to look at it from a broader perspective of than just, okay, what is that financial number? Of course, that's important. And so we're not overlooking that either, but we are trying to think about it in a completely different context and be creative in our thinking. And that's a little bit position by position, because maybe what works for building subs is something different than we need to do for nutrition services or even for bus drivers, and how we can work in that area. And we're also looking at how we advertise differently. People that want to work on the support side, whether it be nutrition services or a bus driver or a custodian, they might not be going to our website or to the state's Teach Iowa website, because they just might not know that's where we post jobs. And so we need to look at advertising in places that those types of positions are more readily available. We're going to a job fair here in Iowa City that really is targeted not towards schools, but towards positions that are more in the service industry, and say, hey, we have that available too. It might not be what you traditionally think of, but we have those types of roles in the organization. So really looking at an expanded network approach to how we recruit. And then you're correct, Janet, looking not just now, but midterm and long term about how we will try to combat some of the things. But I will also tell you that, as I kind of alluded to, some of our colleagues around the state are in much worse shape than we are, and we have great people here, and our retention rate is traditionally very high. And so I believe that we'll be able to weather this and come out and get back to full capacity where we need to be for all of our buildings.
Thank you for the creativity around that. I think it's really important, and your point around pay is important, incentive, retention bonuses, et cetera. I mean, all that's really important, but there's so much research suggesting right now those are not the only drivers of this kind of, the great resignation that we're in right now. And one other thing, kind of piggybacking on something Charlie mentioned, is there anything from the board perspective, can we offer our appreciation to, something formally as a board, those kinds of signs of, we know how hard you're working, we know this is really hard, we know and we appreciate everything you're doing. So if there's anything we can do, just statements, things like that, showing up at meetings, whatever, just let us know.
Thank you.
I guess since we are talking about staffing and we had a lot of community comment, just because I know Illinois Central is the company and that's who they bargain with. So I guess whether this is the right format or whatever the right format, just maybe hearing what that might look like or some ideas to address some of those concerns, just to understand that better. I mean, I know what it looks like with our folks, but when we're dealing with, another company that we're contracting with, what that might look like to try to address some of those concerns.
Sure. And we'll have to just do some research about, where our abilities are, but then also, again, that they are the employer, and so we don't want to overstep their employee relationship, but we'll continue to have conversations because while they're employed by somebody else, they take care of our kids. And so, and we've treated them as part of our staffing family since for a long, long time. And so we want to continue to have those great relationships. So yes, we'll continue to explore some of those pieces as well.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
I also wonder though, Chase, I've seen a lot that the county's considering giving money to excluded workers. Do you know if the union has contacted the Board of Supervisors to seek pay and as an excluded worker under that pot of money?
That I don't know, Lisa, and I have to admit I don't know a ton about that program, but that's something that we can explore with them as well to let them know that opportunity's available and out there.
Yeah, I think that might be a worthwhile step to take, Chase, talk to the county about that, and either what they're thinking about in terms of excluded workers or essential workers.
Okay.
Especially, okay.
Okay.
And while I agree that pay and benefits are not the only thing that people think about when they're deciding to do this job or that job, but they are they're really among the first considerations. So I'm all in favor of doing everything we can to work with all the folks in different position categories in the district, to have them stay here. But we also need to really look carefully about why people are not coming to do bus driving, nutritional services, paras, in the same way that they have been coming in the most recent past. And if we're below wage expectations, then we need to get up to where those expectations actually are. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think sorry, Chase, we can come back with some more information around some of that. I think Janet had an excellent point around what we're just seeing in society right now in general with a lot of workforce shortages in different areas, and what are the things, the softer things that make it appealing about working in the school district. How as a leadership team, as a board, how do we affect culture, and how do we try to address some of those components when plates are super full, stress levels are super high, people are on the edge. I think those are all real things that our people are feeling in the buildings right now. And so when we consider all of those aspects and trying to keep those retention rates like Chase talked about, I think that's an important conversation for us to continue to have and to continue to look at. Like Charlie said, those are some of the first indicators they look at, but it might not be the piece that keeps them here, right? And so what's the components that we can control and help influence as we go along? I know our team's been talking about that a lot more recently here in the last week to 10 days. There was another component where we discussed this morning that, our kindergartners, first graders, and second year graders have never had a normal school year. Our seventh graders, the last time they had a normal school year was in fourth grade, right? And so we're all feeling all of that system strain in a lot of different ways. And even for our teachers, a third year teacher right now really has never had a normal school year, right? They're still operating as almost some first year experience. And so there's a lot of dominoes behind the curtain on this that we're going to need to continue to work on for a long time.
All right, I guess it's my turn. I'm going to talk about a couple of pieces surrounding enrollment tonight. I think it was the last board meeting where JP asked for more of a breakdown of what the PK-12 online program demographics look like. So that's one piece that I'll share with you. And then the next piece is just communication that's going to be going out next week around that second trimester enrollment period for our families. So I'll talk about that a little bit as well. So just a reminder, and these stats are updated daily. I would say with the caveat that our official certified enrollment polls will happen on October 1st, so coming up
real quickly. So I didn't put anything on paper because, I don't necessarily want this out there given the fact that we're about and to enter that time period there.
Hey, Amy.
Yeah.
I'm going to put on the facilitator hat a little bit. Those little mics are not great, and so you got to be pretty darn close for them to pick up. So
Is that better?
I'm struggling to hear. I assume people in the back are struggling a little bit too.
Sorry about that. Thank you for the reminder. So as far as our enrollment in the online program, we have 479 elementary students, 97 junior high students, and 175 high school students. And as far as free and reduced price lunch status, the elementary online program is roughly 32% free and reduced price lunches as compared to 40% district-wide at the elementary. 51% of our students in junior high are on free or reduced price lunches as compared to 38% across the junior highs. And at the high school level, 58% of the students in the online learning program are on free or reduced price lunches as compared to 36% at the high school. For students receiving special education services, the statistics that I'm going to give you are slightly low, and we've got some cleanup to do. So when we have entitled individuals, their information is entered into a system called IMS. That does not talk to our student information system, so that data entry is unnecessary to occur. So we're cleaning that up. That's really important that we do that cleanup. There is a special education count date that happens for all districts across the state of Iowa at the end of the month. So we know our stats are a little bit low right now, but I can share with you what we do have prior to the cleanup. Right now, our online learning program at the elementary shows that roughly 9% of the students are receiving special education services. At the junior high, 15%, and at the high school, 20%. So you can see those stats there. But again,
What was the high school?
About 20%. But those are rough, and if anything, they're low, a little bit on the low side. That district total is showing up at 7%, and we know that overall that's lower than we probably are. We're probably hovering more around that 9 or 10% range. As far as English language learners, at the elementary level in the online program, 10% of the population receives English language learner services as compared to 16% at the elementary, district-wide. At the junior high in the online program, 5.9% are receiving services as compared to 7.5% district-wide. And then in the high school, 10% of the online learning program students are receiving ELL services as compared to 8.5%. And then one last statistic is to do with race and ethnicity. In the elementary online learning program, roughly 50% of our students are white, 50% of our students are students of color. District-wide, we're at about 53% of our elementary students are white, and 47%. So pretty close there are students of color. In the junior high online learning program, 44% are white, 56% would be students of color. That's pretty close to no, it's not close to what we see at the junior high district-wide, 55% white, and then 45% students of color. The high school level, here's where we see a great differential though. 33% of our students are white in the high school online learning program, and of course, 33%, sorry, compared to, and 66% are students of color. Compared to high school, district-wide, 56% would be white and 44% students of color. So questions around any of those statistics?
And we'll see those after October 1st?
Yeah.
The final numbers?
And just remember that it's going to take a while. We will come back with a formal enrollment report for all of you in January. It takes the state, again, typically until about mid-November for them to clean up the data and then get that information back to us. And then, of course, we have to have time to put those reports together for you.
I was just going to ask, so will that be according to the breakout of the schools in the data that you gave to us the first time?
Can you say that again, Dromi?
Will we see that data in the breakout of schools?
Yes, we can do that for you, yeah.
I don't have any questions, but it's just good to see the data, just to kind of know how that compares to the district-wide. And some differences in there. That's interesting
For sure, thank
to
you.
see.
Okay, Sean, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to open it up for questions or just jumps in. Anything else? Any other questions on this topic from directors?
And one more quick mention about next week. So we'll have the administrators Tuesday afternoon for our normal level meeting and admin council meeting, and we'll share with them that we are going to send out parent communication the following day around that second trimester enrollment period being open. We'll close that window on October 16th. And as we're developing that communication and having internal conversation about all the kind of work that's happening behind the scenes, we also know that it's likely this vaccine will become available for the 5 to 11-year-olds. So we've got a caveat in there, or a statement in there, just really trying to share with our parents, to the best. This is the information that we have on hand right now, right? It could even change as early as next week by the time we put this out there, but that we intend to open a second enrollment period, given kind of where we believe that we're at, not at that third trimester, but ahead of that. And so that there would be another change that they could anticipate electing into come winter break, so that when they return from winter break, their students, assuming that they're fully vaccinated, could have the ability to make that change there too. So there could be two opportunities especially for the elementary, where they're right on the heels of one another, but we feel like we need to do our due diligence and offer those 2 time periods.
And to clarify what you just said, if a parent wanted their child to come back in the later enrollment period, are we requiring that the child be fully vaccinated, or the timing of it is just when?
The timing of
okay,
it,
I just wanted to make
Yeah,
sure.
thank you, Lisa.
So, Amy, is it your opinion that we could work on the elementary class size issues that we've seen so far this year that have been of great concern to some parents as we look at changes in online enrollment?
Yeah, I think we can, here's my prediction, and we had a little bit of this conversation this morning. Given the news around the vaccine, we hesitate to think at the elementary level that there may be too much movement, very little movement perhaps, come with that November 18th second trimester starting. We anticipate, if the vaccine truly is rolled out as we think it may be, that there could be a lot of movement then after winter break, right? So if it holds true to what we anticipate would happen, we see very little, perhaps if any, staff adjustments maybe at the elementary needing to be made at November 18th, and that larger adjustment needing to be made for the January 3rd time period. Now, all that's going to be dependent on what we see come back as far as enrollment. The other thing that we did last year with each of these enrollment period changes, but we know we need to highlight and really highlight and say, even if your family is not electing into a change, you could still potentially see a teacher change just because of the shifting. But if our crystal ball is right, we think that there'll be little movement this first time around and more movement after winter break.
I apologize if I missed it and you said it. The second time point, is that specifically elementary because of the vaccination, or is you're opening it up a second time for everybody?
I think we anticipate to open it up for everybody, and the thinking as we were having that conversation this morning was, we don't know how many secondary students are at home because of their elementary age siblings at home.
That's a good point.
Needing the care, so we think we should do it. Now, it's not the best timing for our secondary students. A trimester means so much more at the secondary level, of course, we all know, than these changes at the elementary level. There's a lot more impact, time spent with the teacher, things of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
We're good.
Any other questions or anything else from the team on our school year topic?
Just a comment. I know that staffing is hard, but when I'm wrapping my head around what you guys are doing with different enrollment, thank you. I have a lot of empathy for you, and I appreciate the work, because just trying to wrap my head around how, middle of the trimester, switch teachers. It just, But you guys have done a great job, so I really appreciate it, because it's, I don't know how you do it, but that's why we pay you, and we're volunteers.
Absolutely.
I just want to echo and say thank you for building in the second transition point. I still remember last year's and how stressful and terrible it is, but I know that we have a ton of elementary parents out there who just desperately want their kids back in school, but really think that that fully vaccinated trigger point is what they're waiting for. And so I think that you guys really are thinking of those parents. And I know it's going to be difficult, but really I appreciate having those 2 points built in. Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next item, our equity update. Matt?
Sure. So for our equity update tonight, I think the best thing to do is just kind of share with the public some of the conversation we had at the board retreat on Saturday. Last year, the district had committed to 5 different items that we reported out on a monthly basis around to kind of have accountability to the work. That was hiring and putting in place an ombuds in the district, the social studies curriculum review, the PBIS and rethinking discipline group to look at our discipline practices and protocols, our equity standard development for teachers and leaders, and culture responsive PD for all staff. This year, as we think about what are those accountability measures or the accountability to the work that we want to step into, and we know that that reporting structure seemed to work very good for us to continue to talk about and continue to keep a pulse on what we're doing, that those 5 items still are now in the implementation phase as we look at that. And so we need to continue those pieces, that we need to continue to talk about those. We know, for example, the standard development, that we have progress on the one for administrators because the administrator standards were redone and incorporated into one of the 10, and that we'll continue to look at that for other staff evaluations. We know that Janet's on board and on team, and she's working to implement her office. So those are some examples of where that work doesn't go away or stop, and those pieces are still moving for us. But as we continue into this next year, what are the new things that we need to potentially look at? The board and I really had the conversation on Saturday around our alternative high school and looking at the referral process for that. If you remember, that anchored us back to some of those equity action steps we'd identified in the summer of 2020, and that was a piece of feedback that we had received and an item that was on that list, and so we felt that was important to bring back to the forefront for this school year to do some continual conversation around. And then instead of taking just one other content area or digging in deep into a content area, really looking at our curriculum review process and what equity lens or steps are built into that process, because equity is at the forefront of what we do, and if we're going to do education right, we have to ask that equity question first. So if we're going to have a solid curriculum review process, then we need to make sure that we have the equity tools built into that process. So having a conversation with the board around that item on a monthly basis and what that looks like into that multi-year cycle will be an important step. So with those 2 and then the additional 5 that kind of move into the implementation phase or shift their focus a little different as they're in the second year of work, that's really where we see that reporting structure working throughout the school year. So any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer. If there's anything you have questions for of the team too after our conversation on Saturday, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer.
Matt, I think the part of the development of this implementation plan includes providing frequent updates to the board on discipline disparities and disproportionality. I'm trying to think of, I think Brian is saying that one plan was to provide that data on a trimester basis. Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, I know that we do our, traditional annual report, Charlie, where we have like that comprehensive data, right, of that component. And then as we report out on this PBIS and Rethinking School Discipline group, if there's a data set that you'd like to see or have us report out on a basis there, I'm not sure I'm linking back to the exact conversation, but I know we've talked about different quarterly updates or trimesterly updates, and maybe as we look at that PBIS and Rethinking Discipline group's work being implemented, there could be a data component that we want to continue to reference back to as well, from an implementation phase around PBIS to maybe when things don't go right and they end up in the discipline category, what those look like. So I don't know if that's answering your question or getting to where you're talking.
My preference definitely is to have more frequent reporting of
the data.
Of the data, right. Yeah.
Sure. And now that we're in the implementation part of some of those, I think you're exactly right? That's what we should be looking at to see, are some of these things making a difference, and realizing, you know, it's in year 1 of implementation, what should it look like in year 1? What should it look like in year 5? What are the goals that are set around that work? And then where are we meeting around our goals? So yeah, that's good conversation for us to continue.
All right. Anything else, directors? All right. Did you have anything else, Matt? Sorry.
Nope, that's it on that one.
Let's go ahead and move on to our presentations. We're going to get a playground update, and I don't know if we're just going to kick it right to Ben, or if somebody wants to give him a...
Chase is going to introduce it for us.
I'll give them an introduction just because this is exciting. So we haven't had an opportunity to speak with you all about playgrounds in a long while, it seems. But if you remember, years ago, we had the playground committee and did some tremendous work of moving that process forward. And while we haven't had a chance to talk with you recently, Ben and his team have continue to be busy at work, making upgrades to playgrounds around the district. It's part of our life cycle plan that we have for our playgrounds to continue to make those upgrades. And so we're very happy to share some positive news with you this evening to tell you where we are and where Ben is taking us in the future. And in case I don't have a chance to come back at the end, I just tell you that Ben does tremendous work. Jeff, Ben, and the rest of the team are fantastic. They're awesome. They're on it. They're always thinking creatively about what we can do to make the best spaces for all kids. And so we're lucky to have him. He's a great asset. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Ben.
Alrighty. So a little bit of history and how we got to where we're at now is kind of important. So back in the 90s, a large percentage of the playground equipment was actually wooden structures. In a very short window span, the district phased out those wooden structures and brought in what we know now as compound structures. And they did it in such a short window. By 2014, about 40% of our structures were within the last 5 years of their life cycle. So what we did early on in the inception of grounds was go through and evaluate the playgrounds and try to figure out what did we need to improve on, where the disparities are and everything. And what we found was there was actually equity disparities. A lot of the playgrounds pretty much all the playgrounds were built by PTO funds. So different PTOs could generate different amounts of money, and so there's a lot of disparities between the different schools and that. We also found that because the PTOs were generating the money and oftentimes implementing the playground and installing the playground, that there needed to be some ADA compliance upgrades made in the near future. So in 2014, sat down with my administrators, Jeff, Dwayne at the time, Craig Hansel, and created a Pebble Life Cycle fund just to replace playground equipment. So this was the first time, to my knowledge, that it happened in years and years and years. And really what we were trying to do is to create equity across the district, so no matter what school you went to, you saw similar playgrounds in size and scope and play opportunities in that. We know that we had to transition to modern safety standards. So a lot of that early equipment that didn't have the same safety standards as what we had in 2014. And then we knew that we had to upgrade to modern ADA standards. So those were kind of our goals, moving forward with the Pebble Life Cycle and that. So with those, we kind of carried on and did some major renovations from 3 to 5 playgrounds a year since 2014, attacking those different obstacles. In 2021, we had 3 major playground renovations. One at Lucas was replacing a 1 through 3 structure and a pre-K structure. Kirkwood, we actually were able to use the existing structures. They weren't truly at the end of their life cycle, so we did a lot of upgrades around universal designs, a lot of play panels, merry-go-rounds, and multiple occupancy swings and things of that nature. Coralville Central was very much the same way, so we added some more swings. I think they got a playground as well, some play panels, and then we did some ADA upgrades to the topography to get kids from the building out to, say, the green space and that. We're also working on some minor additions at Grant, Gardner, and Shimmick. Those are actually PTO-funded projects where they put in, say, a swing set, or in the case of Shimmick, they put in a multiple occupancy ADA glider. It kind of sways and glides back and forth for the students. One of our big accomplishments is we've pretty much mastered installing engineered wood fiber to the point that we're now the national standard. We get calls from literally all over the country asking how we got it accomplished. And I've also had to advise another school or a park system, I think it is, that is in negotiations with the DOJ on ADA compliance as well. So they want to know, how is it that we're passing this? How did we get the DOJ to accept our surfaces in that? So we did run into supply chain issues with the pandemic. So last year it was actually our rubber fall zones. We couldn't get it until late October, even though we ordered it in April or May. They're using the rubber for ventilators, and so that delayed us. This year it's actually more about metal. So of those 6 playgrounds, not a single one of them is complete at this point. Normally we'd have those complete by August and the start of school, or at least within a week or so there. But each school is missing something. It could be like a clasp for holding up a swing. It could be a bench for, you know, the glider structure or whatever. We are still expecting to get all those parts in before winter time. That equipment will become operational as we get those parts in. So we did reach a couple of milestones over the last couple of years. We did hit the minimum standard that we wanted for ADA swings across the district, which actually was a hard accomplishment to achieve. And now we're working beyond that. So we're working towards that universal. We're trying to get a higher percentage and have a variety of ADA swings. So maybe one is a 5-point harness full body support, whereas one's a 3-point harness and the legs can actually dangle when a student's actually swinging. Our zero entries, which is the concrete transition into any sort of engineered wood fiber, we're right around 75% complete at the schools. Leveling the perimeters of the playground, so we basically level the topography around the playground for future projects, whether it be rubber fall zones or sidewalks that go around the playgrounds. Basically the infrastructure, the topo is there and ready to do that as we have the funds. The picnic table statement's actually kind of deceiving. So I believe we're right at the minimum standard, but we're trying to go to the future standard, the future code that's coming out, and beyond that. So the future code coming out would be 20% of the tables are actually ADA compliant. We're shooting for 25% there. Again, that's in line with that universal design and trying to make sure there's equal opportunities. Probably the thing that makes me the happiest is all of our obsolete equipment is now gone. We've got over that hurdle, and so now every piece of equipment that we have, we can buy parts for and replace in a non-pandemic situation. So that's actually a very exciting thing. This year, we did do some adjustments to the life cycle, the playground life cycle. So initially, equipment was expected to last 22 years. We've been able to extend that out for 25 years. And we did this for multiple reasons. We wanted to free up more funding for universal design stuff. So we had more money to go out and not do that primary structure, but do the variety of activities that are going on in components. And in that short amount of time of, 2014 till now, there hasn't been a huge jump in safety standards or differences in designs that would compel us to actually swap out the equipment. What's happening now is if they find a safety issue, the companies will contact us and say, this component has an issue, you need to swap this out. And so the general structure is actually still safe, and there isn't really that reason to replace the structure as quickly. So also in the creation of the life cycle, we had this gap of 3 to 5 years where we didn't have anything slotted. By switching this out, extending it by that 3 years, we kind of fill in that gap and kind of make it a little more balanced approach for the future. And then, of course, we wanted to free up some money for outdoor classrooms, which I'm going to show you a slide here in a few minutes, which will increase learning opportunities, and it'll also address those universal design things where you're getting into tactile, the smells of flowers, different visual interests, whether it's plant material or surfacing or whatever it might be. Another thing that we did, I think we're on year 3 of this, we have Pebble funds set aside specifically for ADA upgrades, not necessarily equipment, but if you think of like the topography issue again, we want to make sure that we have sidewalks getting to every area on the playground. So we did phase 1 this year of Weber, where we upgraded the sidewalk that got down to the rubber structure. The next year, we'll be getting the sidewalk down to the actual soccer field and beyond. And so there's a number of miscellaneous places throughout the district where we want to kind of make those upgrades. So I am going to point out, this is Lucas in the picture right here. So as I mentioned, we don't have all the parts. This looks really funky because we have a rubber fall zone, engineered wood fiber, and concrete. we had to shift around the positioning of the equipment in order to keep the school operational and keep the recesses operational. So originally, the new structure was actually supposed to be located here, and this was actually going to be a natural playscape with logs and stumps for kids to play with. So what we did was we flip-flopped those. So this open pit will actually be the rubber fall zone. And what you see is actually the zero entry exposed to what will eventually be filled in with engineered wood fiber and then those natural playscapes and that. So it's a little bit confusing if you compare it to other playgrounds. So future items, we're going to keep expanding on the universal designed activities. So that's play panels, communication boards, hard surface activities, miscellaneous activities. Outdoor classrooms are going to be the big thing. So we're basically funding about the concrete and ADA routes for 2 classrooms per year for the foreseeable future. So the first one actually breaks ground here tomorrow. One of the goals that I think the district should have, and it's one of my goals, is to have at least one synthetic surface at every single playground. So if you have been around long enough, there's benefits to engineered wood fiber and there's benefits to having rubber synthetic surfaces. I still think it would be wise for the district to have at least one of the 2 primary compound structures as a rubber fall zone. It's going to take some years to accomplish. So we have existing ones that we've been trying to cycle out the last couple of years because they're at the end of their lifespan. And so my hope is to pick that up and keep growing in those numbers in the future. I mentioned the ADA routes a few minutes ago, getting out to the green space. There's also community gardens at each of the schools, most of them anyways, where students go out and do planting activities and grow vegetables, grow flowers, look at bugs and insects, everything of that nature. We're trying to get those connected to ADA routes so it's not limiting any students going to those areas. So this is the concept for outdoor classroom. We have 2 different concepts. One's for a flat surface area, one's for kind of a hillside. This particular one's a hillside. So to explain this a little bit, there's an ADA sidewalk that goes down to kind of a central area with a gazebo in the center. This one is a hillside, so it actually has tiers where students can go and sit in kind of an amphitheater kind of feel to it. Stumps and rocks, so students can sit around in kind of a natural play area, as well as picnic tables. And then all through the outside could be any sort of different activities. It could be sound making activities, it could be sensory tables, it could be art tables, whatever the school actually would like to see in those areas, along with plants, natural plantings, to show the wildlife. And so working with Shive Hattery, they came up with the concept. We're trying to treat it as kind of a palette. So when we present this to school, we don't tell them what's going to appear in that space. We ask them, how do you want this set up? What activities do you want to have in there? And we help them try to build that kind of grand vision. And then on the facility side, we're paying for all the concrete and all the ADA stuff to make sure that it's all compliant. And then PTOs and schools are generating the funds to kind of fill out the rest of it. So that's all I have. Questions?
I don't have any questions. I'm smiling behind my mask, like really, really big, because when I came on the school board in 2017, this was not the nature of the conversation we were having about playgrounds. And the amount of progress, this is something that's super gratifying to see, this level of progress in 4 years. I mean, Ben, you are awesome. Jeff, I know you've been helpful and instrumental in this, Dwayne, but the entire support of the district of not just taking our playgrounds to a compliant state, but to a best-in-class state. And the creativity, what you presented tonight, the progress you've made. I love the outdoor classroom concepts and how you're conceiving of that, but just so incredibly proud of the work that you've done. I mean, just kudos, and I mean, yay for our students in this district to have these kinds of playgrounds and enlightened leadership taking us forward into the future, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Janet said. Thank you to Jeff, but especially you, Ben, for being really integral in this entire process, from the playground committee feedback and working with us on developing the rubrics to actually going out and implementing it. So you should be very proud of the work that you've done and continue to do. I'm also smiling because this is great work. I just want to know from you, since this is one of the big projects that, you know, based on board policy, you've been tasked with carrying out, as a board, do we need to take a look at the rubrics that's sort of like your blueprint for doing what you do to make your job flow easier? Is everything working out with that? What do you want to tell us about that we could probably take a look at to make it continue to go as great as it's been going?
Well, I don't know. I didn't really think about that. You know, I'm fortunate that I'm surrounded by really capable people and that work for me. Really, a lot of the success goes onto their shoulders because they're the ones who are going out there doing it day to day. And then I'm fortunate to have a good admin team. We've had a little bit of luck with how the life cycle has worked out, so a lot of the funding's there for the immediate future. And I think we just have to always look in the future and go, okay, we can only go so far with our funds for universal design. The sky's the limit as far as wants and trying to find that balance of what the community wants as well as what we're capable of doing. So, yeah, I think we're in a good spot.
Okay. I mean, I'm only one of 7, but I do hope that you both feel comfortable enough to take it to Chase and Matt when you think it is time for us to take a look at that again to, do our job to assist you to continue to do a great job.
Yeah, I echo everything everybody said. You know, just this conversation in 2017 was a lot different, and the progress is great. You know, I do have a question, especially since we're going out to the public and asking them to renew PEPL. And maybe I don't expect you, frankly, to answer this now or have the information, but I'd like to know what we're spending on playgrounds after we switched over from the PTOs being primarily responsible for their to what we're doing now, because this is coming out of PEPL. And that is a way to remind the public that here's how much money PEPL's paying for our playgrounds. Here's how much it costs to do these playgrounds, and that's how much money is going to come out of the general fund if we want to maintain this same high quality. So, and maybe so just an idea of like since 2017 when we really kicked in with the rubric and kind of going beyond the ADA, you know, how much we've spent on playgrounds, you know, in this last 4 years. And I would imagine that's not like ready at hand. So, but that is something I think would be really interesting for folks.
I ask less, but yeah, he doesn't have it on his Rolodex there, but we'll look at that. We'll bring it back to you. He's looking for it. Yeah, I'm trying to buy him time, but no, I think I hear what you're saying, JP, and so we'll do a comparison because it's not only those dollars that we're spending, but kind of comparison what we've spent historically, and then also, Rathina, to your question about us having the board involved. Sorry, my glasses are fogging up. I think that we can incorporate that in some of the work we're doing around policy and governance about maybe making that part of that standard rotation, because I think the one way we stop or keep from getting in trouble is if we continue to look at our policies and our practices in place when they're going well. And so we'll figure out a way to incorporate some of that guidance into the work that we're doing around P&G.
And that's why we pay you. That's a good point.
Yeah, because I'd love to see kind of how, you know, especially when you say we're going beyond the ADA, and I don't, you know, maybe this format to get into the nitty-gritty, but I am interested, right, in how, you know, what that looks like, and then also towards sort of our inclusive rubric. Again, because I think we are setting a standard for other districts. So it'd just be nice to know, you know, are we getting a B? Are we, you know, what is it going to take for us to get to an A? And especially from the board's perspective, you know, beyond PEPL, you know, that's where maybe we get involved about making financial decisions about, okay, you know, maybe we'd like to like the way it's going and we want to continue to support it or ratchet it up a notch and see if we can get there sooner. But just something for us to think about, I think, as you guys do your planning and analysis.
So Ben, one of my first meetings when I came on the school board was one of your playground presentations. And it's so fun to watch everything that you've done in the past 2 years, and also amazing because of COVID. And like there's this really great work going on behind the scenes, and I think playground is a great example of that. So thank you for moving this work forward. I just want to mention that I'm super excited about these outdoor classrooms. I think Chase can correct me if I'm wrong. It didn't make a top 6 on the FMP community feedback, but I do think outdoor classrooms were a top 10. And so I'm so excited to see that even though that may not have been one of our 6 FMP 2.0 goals, we are moving forward with the outdoor classrooms, and we're going to be rolling those out to schools across the district. And so I'm really excited to see that.
Yeah, you know, Lisa, on that, I think where this really also fits in is that whole child concept, right, with those outdoor classrooms and the flexibility. It's really exciting.
This worked as magic, apparently, already.
Yeah, in the PEPAL budget that you approved in March, we have allocated $1 million for courts, athletic fields, and playgrounds for fiscal year '22. So
Okay, so currently,
in the current year, $1 million is going to those outdoor areas.
and
whether-
again, don't look it up now if you don't have to, but would you say that's about average, what we've been doing the past
I think
few
we bumped
years?
that up the last couple years to accelerate what Ben has said here and get
Up a
some of
bit?
those things, so yes.
Okay, thank you, thanks.
And that money's come from PEPAL funds, is that right, Les? Yeah, I want to commend Ben and Jeff and Chase and all the staff too for doing this. I wasn't on the board when the playground issues were so prominent, but I was one of the people yelling at the board to make them prominent. So,
Oh, we remember.
and it's really commendable that the entire district has responded as in the way that we have, all of you have, and in attending the playgrounds and the needs that we that were apparent to many of us. I gather from your presentation that I need to drop my disdain for engineered wood fibers as surfaces because of progress you've made you've made recent about installing and maintaining them, and I'm willing to do that. I am committed to learn as we go along here. You did mention something about continuing to maybe incorporate PTO funding for some aspects of playgrounds, and I guess my interest would be in just trying to make sure that we wind up with playgrounds across buildings, across sites that are very similar, even with PTO additional as part of the funding stream. So.
Yeah, so one of the cool things is the schools have really adapted this universal design, and it's a lot of the discussion about the components has become a little more prescriptive because we know what those components should look like, and a lot more conversations are centered around universal design and activities. And what we're finding from the PTOs is they're asking, well, how do we help, how do we contribute to make this happen sooner? And so we can kind of target those very prescriptive additions to the playgrounds. In most cases, it's adding an additional swing set, it's adding panels, and kind of the low budget items. And then that allows them to push their funds elsewhere within the district. And so far it's been very balanced. They do have to get essentially my approval to add on to equipment. And so it kind of goes back to the consultants' work that they did in trying to develop that golden ratio and trying to make sure that everything's balanced. So far I haven't hit a lot of resistance to that. They've contributed a lot towards that cause of making everything universally designed. So
Great, thanks, yeah. And I want to join with Lisa and other board members too about the real enthusiasm for outdoor classrooms, because that did emerge as the FMP planning process went along too.
You kind of segued for me. I know that a couple folks had mentioned the rubrics, and as we talk about adding new pieces or replacing pieces and looking at outdoor classrooms, we're going back and kind of checking more boxes on our sheets for all the different playgrounds to keep them updated. They're like a living document for each playground. Is that how that's working?
yeah, so the way it's panning out is there's a living document for every single playground. We developed that rubric the first time we go in since developing the universal design stuff. And then that stays intact. So that's one of the first things we look at when we put together the playground design committee, and we can literally look at it and go, well, we need more multiple occupancy items, or multiple play or solo play or whatever that might be. And so those documents should carry on for the foreseeable future, if not forever. So yeah, so each year we kind of develop and tweak those and make improvements on those. So
Yeah, that's awesome, because like others, right, I remember that we weren't in a great place, many years ago, and well, I shouldn't say we weren't in a great place. We were just behind, right? Just like we were with all of our buildings, we were behind. And there was a push to get not behind, right? And just kind of get to the baseline. And as we've talked, we've gotten past that. And I would just want to make sure, we went through this huge process to get these rubrics and these checklists to make sure that we're getting balance across all of our different pieces and stuff. And I want to make sure, and it sounds like we are, not just a snapshot in time, yep, it looked like this, and then we put that away in a folder and never look at it again. but it sounds like it's being used to help drive those decisions as we're adding new things or changing things out. And that, I think that was the entire goal behind it, so I really appreciate hearing that. So I think that's going to lead us to success. Thanks, Ben.
The last thing I'd add is just, thank you to some of our community members that were really part of that process too. It wasn't just the board or the administration, and former board member Phil Hemingway was very influential in that work we did around the playground committee, along with some of our former employees. Jenny Mittemeyer, a parent in the district, was on there. And so thank you to our community members too that really participated in that process and helped us move it forward. I think it really is a reflection of the collaboration among all aspects of our school community and how we put some improvements in place for our kids.
Agreed. I think we were at a place where we had a lot to learn, but we were willing to learn those lessons. And now I'm also glad to hear that it sounds like we're sharing what we've learned with other places. So pay it forward a little bit. All right, with that, let's go ahead and move on into our action items. We have two. First up is our facilities use policy. We had it briefly earlier at our discussion. Any comments on it?
I move to approve the facility use fee schedule and club rules and fee guidelines.
Second.
All right, Kim, I think we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. Our second action item is, modified supplemental amounts for special education. I know this happens routinely, but I don't know, Les, do you want to give us a little context, please?
Yes, this is an annual process in which when we complete the special ed supplement on September 15th, it generates the district's deficit in special ed, which is essentially where the expenditures match the revenue. It creates a deficit, obviously. We have maintained a deficit for many years, and part of that has to do with the lag in funding because the counts are actually a year behind, and not just in the certified enrollment. They're another year behind in the special ed. And so we're serving kids a year after they're counted. So in a growing district, that continues to do that. And we also have well-paid staff in this district that are serving these kids, and so that's above the state norms. What impacted us this year is the ability to bill for Medicaid services provided. When many of our kids were being served in an online environment or weren't in the buildings, they weren't receiving these services, and so that accumulated or added to our deficit this year. And so our special ed team is doing a great job of managing and serving these kids in the roles that they need to be served in, and so we are providing those services, but it does come at this cost, unfortunately. So I ask that you approve this. The other one that usually comes at the same time is the ELL deficit, but the state hasn't built their portal yet for that to compute that, so that will probably come at a November board meeting when that gets completed, unless it gets done real quickly. Otherwise, it'll be late October, early November. So you will see that one coming as well. So just heads up if you're thinking there's something missing.
Thanks, Les. Any questions, directors?
No questions. I really appreciate the special ed deficit screen. Is that new? I don't remember seeing that piece in the past.
I've done it for several years.
Okay, I don't know why I hadn't seen it, but I appreciate frankly, the transparency of that data and just seeing where the money's going, and appreciate that we do what we need to do to serve kids and get them what they need. And thanks to Lisa too for taking that tack. I appreciate that. And it's the right thing to do, so I certainly support this.
Yeah, following up on your comment, JP, that this is the right thing to do. I hope the board doesn't get mad at me because I'm going to try to compliment the legislature. It occurred to me in looking at your well-presented numbers and arguments here, Les, that this is a good example maybe of legislation that actually responds to the needs of students in a district by providing funding to provide for their education. So perhaps we can convey that in some part to the current legislators, the legislators, that we are appreciative of the mechanisms that they've put together to fund special education at a level that it needs to be funded, as opposed to some smaller level.
Charlie, I appreciate those comments, but I don't want you to break your arm patting them on the back, because the receipts for special ed are generated based upon the weightings of the students.
Yeah.
And it has been at least 10 years and maybe 15 years since any of those weightings have been changed. So they are not really keeping up with the services that are being provided to these students. So I don't want to jump on the bandwagon with you. I'm sorry. I'll go that route. But we are providing those services, and they do look at it annually and haven't made those adjustments. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate your experience and knowledge for correcting my enthusiasm. So.
It wasn't a correction, Charlie.
And I'll take that opportunity to throw every single Congress since 1975 under the bus for never one time, as they promised, fully funding special ed law. It's never been fully funded. It's anywhere from 14 to 19%. And if they funded that, if people realize this $9 million would be back in our general fund, because we'd be getting money from the federal government for doing what they say we should do, which we should do, which is enforce this law and make sure kids get what they need, but they don't follow their own rules and give school districts all over this country the funding they need, and maybe we'll get there this year. But I just want folks to know that because the federal government won't do this, this is $9 million out of our general education classrooms. And so they do need to step up. This is law. It's an unfunded mandate, and they put it on local school districts. I'm appreciative that this local school district does what it's supposed to do. I'm proud of that fact. But it's on Congress to provide this money for students who need these services. They're entitled individuals, and the government, by law, should be funding this, and it's an unfunded mandate. So thanks for that opening for me to get on my soapbox a little bit, but this is money that could be lowering our class sizes if the federal Congress did their job to appropriate these funds.
Well said, and with that, I will move to approve the request for modified supplemental amounts for special education deficit.
Second.
All right, any further conversation? All right, Kim.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right. Next up, we have our agenda setting. As we talked on Saturday, looking at when we were going to have our committee meetings, it looks like we've already put an operations committee meeting there on the 12th, along with our regular board meeting. It looks like everything on there is kind of the usual suspects. I'm trying to scroll through the agenda real quick of our regular board meeting. As I mentioned, I would like to bring back our conversation on secondary transfer policy. I don't know if that does need a work session or if we can have something. I know the last time we talked, it was kind of work through the process of having something to present that we could then discuss as a board and eventually take action on. So I don't know if we'd be prepared to have something to present in that area on the 12th, or does that need to be later?
We can try to have something ready to go there on the 12th, Sean. I think it's just dusting off an old conversation and kind of giving a status update about where we left it off, what new pieces are in play, and then kind of what you guys would like to see moving forward. We had the conversation around building off a closed concept of transfers, so we would continue to, chart down that path.
I think that's fine. I just don't want us to be spinning our wheels and saying that we're going to talk about it 50 times and never actually do something. So I want to make sure we're keeping it at the forefront.
Yeah, I would support that, Sean, too. I'd also like to ask if what's our thinking on if we want to proceed with the bus driver's request for hazard pay or some additional pay. I think they mentioned that amount, and Jesse Case also suggested to starting a dialogue between Illinois Central Teamsters Union and the district. I'd like to see if we could follow up with that. I don't know if that's an operations committee thing or if it's goes someplace else.
I know when we were having the conversation, I know Chase was saying trying to get some more information, you know, about how that would even work, right? And what the different things are. And I think that that's an important first step and then bring that back. And I don't know if we house it underneath the same topic that we had tonight, right? Our school year. But hopefully we'd have something to come back with after looking for more information.
Yeah, I think we'd continue to work in the interim like Chase talked about, and we'll have that 21-22 school year item again. You know, we could be intentional about putting our ESSER funds portion around there again. We had, you know, delivered a presentation to you guys about where those funds are encumbered right now, and so we could just line that out there and we could revisit the conversation at that point.
The only thing I would add is that if we were going to bring that back under a certain umbrella, that from our end, just, I know Brady's here and from folks from some of our other associations, we'll hear this, is that, you know, if we're going to look at that for one group, we need to look at that for all groups. We just can't have this conversation in a vacuum because we do it for one, or we'd have that consideration for one, then we'd have to circle back around. So that would be my only piece, is that we can definitely research it, but we're not going to research it for only one group of employees. We're going to need to take a broader, more comprehensive look about across a variety of different employee groups.
I have to say that, I mean, we do not employ the bus drivers. We have a contract, and I am very hesitant at all to start exploring this for the reasons that Chase just said. We have several people in this district that we do employ. We have our paras, our certified staff, our nutrition folks, a whole bunch of other people. And I don't know why we would explore hazardous pay for a group of people that are not our employees and then exclude people who actually are our employees. I am certainly sympathetic and empathetic to the bus drivers, but we have a limited pot of money. I think, if I'm remembering the slide right, we only have about $650,000 of unencumbered COVID dollars left that we haven't assigned to. And that is certainly not enough money to provide hazard pay for all of our employees and the bus drivers. So I'm just not very receptive to continuing this in a way that the speakers asked us to. I think that they have options to explore, like I said, talking to the supervisors about getting included under their excluded workers or essential workers payouts. And I know the cities, Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty, I believe, are also exploring those groups as people to give some of their COVID dollars to. But I don't think we are the appropriate body or forum for that group of individuals to make that request to.
I don't think we're ready to articulate what our position would be tonight, but I think what Chase is alluding to is probably some of the information we would come back with. So when I say, you know, if we want to put it under that item and we would, you know, come back with what are the relevant things for you guys to consider, you know, I think it's somewhat along the lines of the different points, high points of the conversation you guys have had loosely about it tonight. And so I guess, just so you know, when I come back and say it wouldn't be a plan to necessarily do that, I think it would be okay if you asked us to consider it, what are the points you should think about, you know, or that we would advise you to think about when making that conversation. So I think that's what the conversation would really be for a follow-up. I mean, we didn't know that this was going to be an issue until, you know, sometime today that we'd have some people here commenting on it. So we weren't ready to detail all those things out for you this evening.
Yeah, I think the conversation's worth having, and what I don't want to happen, right, is, you know, because we are giving our staff some ESSER dollars. We're giving them some pretty sizable chunks of money for that. And what I don't want to happen is our bus drivers get left out because the city's taking care of their folks and the counties, right? And I just think of all the entities in the area, you know, let's see how this unfolds. I just think there's a big push for folks to say, hey, here's some folks who are doing hard work and they're not affected. And then in my head, because this isn't just an ask for the school district, it's all over the community, it's, I think people saying, what can government entities do to make sure people don't slip through the cracks? And I just think it's worth us being part of that conversation, whether we take the whole burden but I think we should be involved, certainly because they are a part of our family, and I wouldn't want the Iowa City School District, you know, our bus drivers to be like the one group in this whole area that ends up getting left out. So just so that we're involved and we've got some, you know, we're in the game and we're having those conversations.
And I think that's kind of what I'm looking forward for too, right? You know, Lisa brings up some very significant issues, you know, we need to figure out how to handle them or not. So. But I think, you know what, match you're suggesting would probably be what I'm looking for for the time being anyway.
Were there any other items that either directors or the admin team would like to make sure we got on the 12th? No? All right, so we have one agenda item left, and since I have the mic, I get to go first, and I'll do the official thing. So tonight is Director Etsy's last meeting with us in person before she gets to go have another baby, and we're all very excited about that. So I'll get the official thing out of the way. We have this lovely little plaque, and I will just pass it down so you can have it and hold it and smile and pose for everyone.
Obviously, there's COVID, so I can't shake your hand.
We'll hug later. It's fine. She's scared that we're going to all make fun of her, but in all seriousness, she came in at an incredibly hard time. And, you know, we had to go through an appointment process, and I might steal some of JP's thunder because we had a conversation about this the other day, that as we went through the appointment process, we had many folks apply to be appointed. And we went through a process of a ranked choice thing, and it was kind of clunky, and it was a struggle, particularly as we're trying to do things remotely. But as JP said when we talked about it, in the end, the way ranked choice works is that you get to the right answer, and I feel like we very much got to the right answer. We had the right person, the right place at the right time. You have jumped in, I know, scared at first of how much you didn't know, but you were willing to learn, and you took the time to do that. You joined Ruthina and I on the P&G committee, and have even had a meeting tonight doing that, and so we greatly appreciate you spending the time on that committee. But very basically, we have enjoyed getting to know you. I'm very glad that we didn't have to only do it remotely. I think you were on the board for about 8 months before anybody ever actually got to see you in person, so it was a nice change to actually see you, although I do miss the virtual meetings where your daughter joined us occasionally on meetings. Adorable. So from my heart, thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you back on this board table in a couple years when you run for election again later. And now I will let everybody else roast you and make you feel uncomfortable.
I'm going to go last.
So I'll jump in. I'm not going to roast Dromi. I'm just really, really, really pleased to have had a chance to work with you, and I'm so glad. First few meetings, we had the barriers, and now we can actually, you know, talk more easily. So just, you've been an amazing board member in an incredibly hard time, and it is really hard to imagine how you stepped in the middle of all that and managed to learn and contribute and be a really important member of the school board. So thank you for your service, and best of luck to you.
I'm going to keep it short too. No, it's just been so great getting to know you and getting to work with you. I remember after you got appointed, having you come over to my driveway and sitting 6 feet apart and talking about school board. And I've enjoyed sitting by you. I don't know why everybody in this seat leaves. I'm starting to think it might be me. So if it was, I'm sorry. But no, best luck. I can't wait to see pictures and get updates and hear how things are going. And I know that we'll see each other again very soon.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate, yeah, Sean stole my thunder there, which is fine. But I do think the way that worked, it did work out to get the right person, and I think that's what that was designed to do. And it really, yeah, I get it when you come on and then you learn what's really involved. It's a lot, it's a heavy lift, but you stuck with it. And I really appreciate your perspective. You bring a different perspective, and your demeanor in meetings is always calm and professional and present. And so I, like Sean, as soon as it works for your life and your family, truly consider running again. You've been a real asset to this board, and I'd love to see you, fill out a full 4-year term someday. I really would.
I would love to, to be able to run with you drawing at some point in the future, although you may want your new baby to be in high school by the time you consider this again. And I really appreciate and commend you and thank you for your decision to apply for this, for the opening at that time, and to accept it. And calmness is one of the things that I really value in people, and I certainly value that in you, your time on the board and what you brought to us as we make our deliberations. You've kept me from going off the deep end several times in working with you, and I really appreciate that. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in the future, and the best of luck to you.
Thank you, Charlie. So I promised her I wouldn't make her cry, but I had probably lied, but I don't know. We'll see. Because I am super emotional of the bunch, I'm going to pass this down because there's more in the note just for you to keep as a memory of your service. I have truly enjoyed getting to know you. You're my sister. So I love you, Eddie, and Sassy, and baby Etsy, who's on the way, and I can't wait to meet and give love to. It feels like you've been on the board forever, in a good way, though, because we instantly clicked. You learned so much and jumped right in from day one. I'm going to miss having you up here with me.
I'm sure this is recorded, and I'm going to try not to be emotional. I have really enjoyed working with all of you. I know at the beginning, it was so overwhelming, and I always thought to myself, why would anybody want to do this? Like, I'm not joking about it. I questioned why I was doing it, but as time went on, as I looked at the materials, as we talked as a board, I just realized that it's not just about me, or it's not about you, but you guys have really decided to commit to this, and it's not just about just different families, but the entire community. We're talking about students, teachers, people who help in terms of education, and we cannot do without education, no matter where we are in this world. So thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it, and who knows? I might show up again. Who knows? But thank you so much. Please take care of Ruthina. But thank you so much. I appreciate Matt. It's been nice talking to you, mostly on Sundays, and teasing you about your bad taste in football teams. I did. I know I've been bothering Chase a lot, but it's been a joy knowing all of you, and thank you for your service. And I hope you'll be here in, who knows, 10 years, 4 years, 5 years. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. God bless you all.
All right. Everybody join me. Before we end here, first you'll have to tell us how you keep Charlie from going off the deep end, because we'll need that. And since we couldn't just let you leave, a reminder to the board that we do have a closed session scheduled right after this. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.